everybody. Welcome to this next edition of Women in Whiskey, brought to you by the Whiskey Lifestyle. I'm Rashawn Hall, aka Bar Time Stories. And this week we are talking to Texas Whiskey's whiskey scientist and head blender, Ale Ochoa. So welcome, Ale, to the Whiskey Lifestyle.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about Texas whiskey first and foremost.
Sure thing. I'm happy to talk about TX all day. So TX was founded back in 2010 by Leonard Firestone and Troy Robertson. The first product they released was an American blended whiskey. And in 2016, we've had a 90 proof bourbon, barrel proof bourbon, a cognac sherry port finish, as well as the first Texas bourbon bottled in bond. So Texas is making amazing whiskey, and we're so happy to be able to be a part of that story.
Okay. So first off, I'm glad that you corrected me. This TX whiskey, I assumed, just like I assume other things that I was incorrect about, that it is TX whiskey. Got it. So tell us a little bit about what a whiskey scientist does. I think that's a great title and something I have not heard before.
So first off, it's just a really cool title. It's a lot of fun. And that's usually going to get more questions on that than about like, what's bourbon, what's whiskey. So whiskey scientist, what I've done with the role is I did everything from starting off in quality, establishing a sensory program, blending, product development. I think it's a title that can just wear a lot of hats and just kind of goes all over and everywhere in quality and blending and sensory. We're using science and in blending a little bit more art than science to be able to create great products.
Okay. And how did you get to become a whiskey scientist? Tell us about your journey.
A lot of luck and really good timing. But also I like to think a lot of hard work to be able to be ready when I needed to be. I was studying at Texas A&M. I'd gotten my undergrad in food science and was getting my master's in sensory science and flavor chemistry. And I was actually working with coffee, which also a lot of fun, love coffee, but whiskey was a dream. And my entire program knew me as the whiskey girl because that was the spiel I'd always give is like, I'd love to work in coffee or in cereal or in meat, but like whiskey is the dream. And I happened to be at a coffee conference that was a lot of different departments coming together, working together. And one of the professors heard that whiskey was the dream. So he introduced me to his PhD student who was the master distiller here at TX, Rob Arnold. And my dream became a little bit more of a reality. I worked with him for my master's project on a project to see if we could prove or see if there's data that backed up if terroir could be seen in whiskey, like from a new make. So what that project was is he grew 4 different varieties of corn in 4 different regions of Texas. He made that into a new make. He sent them to me, and then I ran flavor chemistry for volatiles. Did analysis on the actual corn to see if there was a difference in proteins, fats, starches, and had a trained panel to be able to do descriptive analysis so that we could see if we could draw from the chemistry or from the roots if there was a difference in the product.
Okay. And what were your findings? Did you was there a difference? Did you discover terroir? That's the $1 million question.
We did see that there was an interaction between the environment and the varieties that we were growing to see that there was potential for more flavor development. But I think it was the first step in a paper, and I started working with TX right after that. So my focus got shifted away from research into quality and production where it needed to be. We saw potential, and actually Rob and I published a paper about it. And I could not tell you what the title of it was. I think it was like assessing the effects of variety and environment in corn. But he also wrote a book which has a nicer title, which is The Terroir of Whiskey. And he goes through his journey of exploring terroir. And part of that, one of the chapters is about the research that we did.
Awesome. And you said you were, whiskey was the dream. Why was whiskey the dream for you?
I really remember wanting to travel when I was younger. Like that was the goal, is like find a job that lets you travel, find a job that lets you like explore other cultures. And I think there's just something in me that really wanted, like my parents are from Mexico. So it was one, I love being able to reconnect. And we grew up here, and my brothers and I grew up in Texas, but it was a way of like, we always felt a little apart from the Mexican culture. So it was a way of like being able to reconnect. And I think one of the easiest ways and the most universal way to do that is with food and drink. So that kind of led me into wanting to not only explore our Mexican heritage, but also being able to explore other heritage, just because there's so much in the world. Why limit yourself to only knowing one way of life? So I wanted to do that. And somehow that got mixed in with a professor telling me, or like he was telling the class that he traveled to Scotland and how at a very, very, very high level, grain, water, yeast, wood, all of that goes into making whiskey, but how it was so different what you got from Scotland, Ireland, Kentucky, Tennessee, Canada. And that just kind of started thinking like there's something in the process or there's something in the ingredients. And it just kind of became like a little bit of a mystery and something that like I just wanted to figure it out. And that's what led me to food science. And when I was in food science, honestly, that only got stronger, especially with like food chemistry, like knowing what all could affect flavors. And then there is something about not necessarily the mystery, but like there's still the unknown about the maturation that like that's what drew me to whiskey. When I started working with whiskey, I was not a whiskey drinker, and happily that changed very quickly once I started because you needed to explore the flavors that were there. But it was definitely the science and just kind of like, why is this happening? How is this happening? That really drew me into to whiskey.
That's awesome. And you said you were really wanted to figure out, do you feel like you have figured it out? Obviously, maybe not fully. Okay.
No, if anything, now it's just more of like, I'm aware of what I don't know, and I don't know a lot. And I mean, I think that's beautiful too. There's always like that chase of like learning more. And I do feel like I've learned a lot more than when I started, but I also see the bigger picture now. And it's just, I don't know if I ever want to fully figure out everything, because that's kind of where like that mystery and that art really lies. But I do feel like I've learned, just I don't feel like I'm any closer to figuring out those answers.
Okay. But I think that interesting thing is someone who came into this business not being a whiskey drinker and learning about whiskey both as a consumer and as a maker at the same time provides you a unique experience for when you're talking to people who are not knowledgeable on the subject. Tell me a little bit about how you explain that, whether it's, if you're at a family party and you're meeting a friend for the first time, or, I don't know if you guys do, if you host tastings, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about how you explain whiskey to newcomers.
So just from my background in sensory and just my own passage or like journey in learning whiskey, what really helped me was having someone being able to like break down the pieces and like there's apricot in this, there's spice in this, because that just kind of helps me feel like I have solid footing. So usually when I do take someone through whiskey, I try to tell them like, this is the style, this is what goes into the style, and then let's go into the tasting. That way it just gives them like a little bit of a guide. And for me, that really helped. And I actually was incredibly lucky that once I started blending for the company, I had a coworker who was a whiskey collector, and he would bring in whiskey for me because at the time I knew what TX was, and I was still developing like drinking whiskey, and I love drinking TX, but I only had TX, so I knew exactly what it was. But the only way to really like improve and even improve TX is to see what all of whiskey can be, and then seeing where you can improve from there. So he brought in stuff from all over the world, different styles, and that just really helped my whiskey education. I think before I still kind of compare it to wine, where like if I taste wine, I'm like, I like it, it's red, or I like it, it's white. Like that's what I know about wine. But with whiskey, it's a little bit more like, okay, I can kind of tell where there's like medicinal, like did they use peat in this, like which areas it was made in, or even like not that it's super clear cut, but you can kind of say like this kind of tastes like it was made in a hot region versus a cold region, or like there's a finishing, or this kind of oak was used, just from what you can tell in the taste. But that came with a lot of practice. And I know that people don't always have the incredible luck that I did in having someone that's a whiskey collector teach them. So I do my best to help them at least through knowing what it is, the heritage, if I can, a little bit, and taking them through tastings and even recommending, like, if you don't like this whiskey, maybe you would like a different whiskey after I can get a sense of their taste, just to give them something to enjoy. I think I was told everyone's a whiskey drinker. You just have to find the right whiskey. So if I
I
can
love
feed someone
that.
the right whiskey, I'm happy to.
Okay, there you've given me two great quotes already, so I'm gonna definitely be quoting both of those. So
As long as you make them
tell,
sound good.
of course, of course. I
Thank
mean,
you.
it's not hard. I'm just listening and asking hopefully the right questions. So tell us a little about whiskey blending. Describe a little bit about what an average, what that experience is, and what an average day for you is like, if there
Sure.
is such a thing.
I don't know if there's an average day. There are like average tasks that I have to do like periodically. So blending is kind of I don't think it's as much of a, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a taboo word anymore.
Hmm.
But unless you are drinking a single barrel, um, everything is blended or married,
Mm,
because you're combining different barrels together. And as a blender, depending on what you're working on, like, you're either trying to keep the products consistent or you're trying to make them very different. Sometimes
hmm,
it's you want them batch driven, not like consistency driven.
hmm,
So part of my job is I monitor the stock from the time it is like 12 months old all the way until it is close to its bottling date or bottling age. Like for us, our minimum age is a 4-year-old product.
hmm,
So close to like 3 years and like 10 months, we'll start seeing what our stock looks like, seeing what flavor profiles are there. And then when it's time to make a batch, I will start putting the flavors together the way that I think will be consistent with the product. Or if we're making something that's like a single barrel, not a single barrel, but like our barrel proof doesn't have to be consistent. Like that wasn't one of our goals. What can
hmm,
I do to make this high proof, barrel proof palatable so it's not super hot, but also that
hmm,
you can see a different flavor coming through. So a lot of it was trial and error.
hmm.
I almost never make one recipe. I almost always have a minimum of 3 to 5 recipes that
Okay.
we will taste through and choose from. And they all have little differences, whether I had more wood forward characters, more fruit forward characters, or like sweet characters.
Hmm.
And then from there, we have a team that will taste through them, kind of pick one or two and say, like, we like these two, but we would like to see these changes made.
Hmm.
And then we'll compare them to something that's already on the shelf. And like our goal is always like, if we can't be consistent, we need to be better.
Okay.
And I do the blending, but I also have an amazing team that I work with. Like whiskey's
Mhm.
the biggest team sport there is. So I'm very lucky to work with them and not have to make those kind of decisions in a vacuum.
Okay. And what's an expression, a blend that you've done? What's an aha moment or a oh my god moment that you've had in this experience as a blender? Is that whether that's a particular expression or just a day, a normal day where something clicked for you?
Oh, okay. I think usually our aha moments are like expressions. It's just whenever we find a new favorite, like we like
Mm,
everything that we make. That is our goal, is to we want to make stuff that we like always. And it always surprises me. Like I have a favorite and then we'll make a new expression, or we start checking it like a couple months before and we haven't checked them for like a year. And it's like, oh, this turned out better. Like this, we thought it was
mhm,
going to be good, but it like exceeded our expectations. So um, in that sense, we have a lot of aha moments in that, like,
mm,
when we're checking our stock, we can be like, oh my God, this is good. Like we had beta there ourselves, but like, man, this is good. This really like held through or came through for us. So
mm,
being able to do that with um just new products, or even like as we're sampling different floors of the barrel barn, different barrel
mhm,
types, that's always exciting to kind of like, ooh, I'm excited about this one, marking it. Um, I have sensory notes that we make for all of our tastings.
mhm.
And my aha moments, like usually I'll put the tasting notes, give it a profile and a use, and then at the end I'll say, "Wow!" Just if anybody were to
Okay.
read them, they'd be like, "What is going on with your notes?" That's how I like see, like, "Oh yeah, I was really
Yeah.
impressed by it. We should look at
Mhm.
it."
Okay. No, it makes total sense in my notes when, the few times I've done barrel picks or even if I'm doing trying out a cocktail program, several rare, very random stars in my notebook means that there was something I like. So even if I'm flipping through, I'm like, what is that thing that I went back to? So totally get it. It's funny. I was going to initially ask that question was previously going to be, what is your favorite expression currently? But I know people always say, much like artists who say every song they make or every painting they do is like a child of theirs, so they can't pick a favorite. But since you mentioned you guys have current favorites, like what is do you have a current favorite expression or
I
any that
100%
TX
have
has
a
released?
favorite child.
Okay,
I
okay,
can
let's
pick
go
one.
for it. Well, please tell
Um,
us all about he or she or they.
so right now it's actually our cognac finish. We just released it this year. It's just something that pairs so beautifully with the flavors of the bourbon. We used it is a straight bourbon. It was, I think, under 3 years old, but we paired it with the cognac and we left it in there for a little under 2 years. So it was something that um, the delicate flavors of the cognac plus the bourbon that hadn't taken on too much oak. It's wonderful. It gets hot in Texas and it's already starting to get
Hmm.
hot. So it might also be my favorite because I change them depending on the season of what I want to
Okay.
drink. And that cognac on ice is going to be the summer sipper.
Okay, amazing. And to that point, Texas, like I said, we talked earlier, Texas is not, and people don't necessarily think of Texas immediately when they think of whiskey. And being Mexican American, tell us what that connection to Texas and in your own heritage means for creating an expression like this. It's obviously such a very unique cultural, whiskey is typically a very cultural story, as you mentioned, depending on the region it's or places created in.
So, as far as just like heritage and like using our culture and whiskey, I think I have the same thing for just general. Like the more diversity you can bring in, just the more
Mhm.
experience, the more viewpoints you are bringing in. It opens you up to ideas that you wouldn't have thought of. That it just gives you a lot of creative background. It um, how am I trying to say this? You might be more exposed to more spices, exposed to different foods, different flavors, different ideas, traditions that might then influence the work that you're doing. And I
Mhm.
think that's always a beautiful mixture when you have people from different paths of life come together and just create a beautiful product together. So the more room at the table with different walks of life at the table, the better product you can put out. And not just for like our product alone, but like for all of whiskey, for all of
Mhm.
spirits.
And to that end, the series is called Women in Whiskey. We started it during Women's History Month this year. And just, there's so many more amazing stories to tell like yours that we wanted to continue with. What does that phrase mean to you?
Oh, women in whiskey.
Yes.
Um, I like it and I do appreciate the phrase, and I'm
Okay.
always so thankful when I'm able to share our story. I went into whiskey really naively. I didn't stop to think like it's a male dominated industry. I just knew like I want to work with whiskey. I'm going to work with whiskey.
Hmm.
And I was also really fortunate to have joined a team that we are either 50-50, if not so the women outnumber the men at our TX
Mm.
campus. And it wasn't until like a year or two that I started hearing the phrase women in whiskey. And so for me, like women have always been a part of whiskey, from working here at the site, but also from the historical point of view. Like women were the ones that were in the household making whiskey,
Mm.
distilling it. And they're in accounting, they're in sales, they're in marketing and retail and production and quality. So I've always seen as women a part of the story, but I also know that they're starting to be represented more or be seen more in the public eye, which I think is awesome because
Hmm.
I went in really naively, not really thinking like, oh, it's not, uh, women are playing less of a role. It was, um, I just went in, but I also know that there are other people looking in that want to get in that might not know like how to either start working with whiskey or that it was even a possibility until they see someone that can represent them, like until they see other women in there and saying like, this is how I did it, but there's many paths in. So like,
Mm.
you're just kind of making a path for other people to follow. And it's awesome whenever we get to see more women. And as far as women in whiskey, it's always amazing. Like you feel like an automatic kinship with them, like kinsmanship. You just feel like an automatic
Yeah.
connection with
Hmm.
them. Like we all have the same passion. We all have the same goals and drive. And especially I think like in the larger view of things, women are still not seen as much as men in the industry.
Hmm.
It just gives us something where like there's more support going for one another. And I can't even take credit for this quote. I heard it not that long ago, but like when the tides rise, all ships float as well, or
Hmm.
something along those lines. So like the more women in whiskey we see, hopefully the more women in whiskey will become common and not as like unusual to hear about.
Hmm. Absolutely. No, I love that. And uh, when you are meeting people who, if I'm sure you're at the distillery, I've had experiences where people meet you and they want to learn more about whiskey. People of all walks of life, as you mentioned. What is that advice you give someone who wants to get into this business, into this industry?
Always ask questions and always ask like how you can get in, because my biggest motto of life is always ask. The worst that can happen is you'll get told no. The best that can happen is that you will get your dream job. Just seeing what part of whiskey you like, what style of whiskey you like, enjoying the product, educating yourself on the product, but then a lot of it's just seeing where you can get experience, seeing you can get work from. Part of the reason I met the master distiller, which ended up getting me my job here, was I wanted to know, I didn't know how to start working with whiskey. And all the positions I saw were like sales or brand managers, and that wasn't something that I had a background in. So I talked to him and got advice from him, and it was, do I need to get a PhD? Am I good here? What can I do to be a better fit for the whiskey industry? And I just asking advice, talking to producers or production or teams. That way you kind of see where your interests lie, and that might help direct you toward the path that you want to follow.
Awesome. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and ask some more personal, fun questions. So when you're not on the campus, you're not on the TX campus, what is Allie doing for fun? How do you find that work-life balance?
So what do I do? I'm kind of boring.
I'm sure you're not.
I try to exercise just to kind of keep my mind fine, like balance everywhere. I think I like to see friends. I love connecting with people, and that's actually something that does come back to whiskey. Is I wanted to work with whiskey because it's something that you can use in celebration, something that you can use in camaraderie, like just making friends out of strangers. That's something that whiskey does. So like, I like to be able to go see friends. I like to be able to connect with other people. I like to also sleep. So there's that balance as well. Yeah.
It's important. Okay.
Yeah. I just like being around people, and like, I don't really know.
Okay. All right. So if you were going to do a food pairing with whiskey, you're gonna a nice, whether it can be a TX cocktail, it can be a TX neat, TX nice. What is give me a food pairing that I should go out and we should go out and try with TX.
All right. So we're in Texas, so we have to go barbecue, and smoked brisket. Smoked brisket is the Texas barbecue. Honestly, I think, are we doing a TX pairing?
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
doing TX pairing. Either with the sherry finish that has kind of like the dried fruit, but it also has like a savory side with barbecue smoked brisket, or on site, we actually do a distillery only release. That's an experimental line. And this one actually probably be better for brisket. It is a mixture of 3 finished barrels, a bourbon finished in wine, a bourbon double oaked, and then a bourbon finished in a double oak smoked barrel. And it's not overwhelming smoke. It's like nice. It's present, but it's not overwhelming. And it would actually go really well with barbecue. And then TX blend for any dessert. And yeah, the port finish with any dessert really, like especially if it's like a fruit dessert.
Okay. All right. Well, now I'm gonna have to get down to the campus and try that special experimental cast. All right. And so our last question is always, okay, if you could have a pour of TX with anyone dead or alive, who would it be and why?
All right. So I thought really hard about this question, and I was struggling to come up with people. So I sent it out to friends, and they gave great answers.
It's cheating a little bit, but it's okay.
I'm not going to use their answers because it actually if I could, I thought about it, and I've had drinks with all of these women before, all in whiskey or all in spirits. I would like to bring them together. So it's just, they're all women that I've worked in spirits. They have been innovators, pushers. They have been really supportive of the whiskey industry and also other women in the industry. So also they've been like mentors. They've like just helped me personally grow and like feel more at home in the industry. So Marcia Licorice from Iron Root Distilling, also in Texas, and Dana Shricks from Shricks 2, also in Texas. They are powerhouses, so much fun, best stories I've ever heard. Marcy Ruderhausen, who was one of the first masters of Scotch, and Carrie Ann Fuller, who runs Straight Up 615, and she's been like a great connector, and just all of them great mentors, great like growing, and just been fantastic friends. So I've had drinks with them individually. I would love to bring them together. Okay. Does that count as my answer?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take it. I like it. I like it. It's a great combination. If you decide to do that, please let us know. We'd love to film that and be a part of that and hear those great stories. Well, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, Ali, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Yeah, just I guess lastly, tell people where they can find TX Whiskey and where they can follow, et cetera.
So you can find TX Whiskey in Texas. I know we're in 36 states. Probably the best site to go check is our website, frdistilling.com, and then go to the shop tab, and you'll see all of the products that we have, as well as, I think, a locator so you can find them where they are in your state or as close as possible.
Awesome. Ali, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you so much. And if y'all are ever able to visit Whiskey Ranch, please come out here. We love having visitors.